Vince McMahon is a complex man with quirks and secrets you might not know about. So in this video, Wrestlelamia looks at the untold truth of Vince McMahon and his biggest secrets. Number 1. He grew up in a trailer park. Although Vince McMahon's dad was the famous wrestling promoter Vincent James McMahon, the future WWE leader lived with his brother and mother in a trailer park in Havelock, North Carolina after Vince Sr. remarried. In a 2001 interview with Playboy magazine, McMahon described his early years. A New Moon trailer, 8 feet wide. Trailer park isn't poverty, you don't have much privacy, but there are nice things about it. Everything is compact, and it beats some other places. Prior to that, I lived in Manly, North Carolina, in a house with no indoor plumbing. That could get a little disconcerting in the wintertime, and the summertime wasn't much better, sitting on the privy with the heat and humidity and stench. Oh man, the flies. So when we moved to the trailer park, it wasn't so bad. Eventually, Vince's dad would take him in for the summer, exposing him to a much different lifestyle and showing him the promise in promoting. Number 2. He regrets he wasn't able to end his stepfather. Vince McMahon's mum Vicky lived with Leo Lupton, an electrician who McMahon claims had a violent streak. According to McMahon, Lupton began beating him when McMahon was only 6 years old, sometimes using tools such as a pipe wrench. He would recall trying to defend his mother from Lupton's physical abuse. I was the only one of the kids who would speak up, and that's what provoked the attacks. You would think that after being on the receiving end of numerous attacks I would wise up, but I couldn't. I refused to. I felt I should say something, even though I knew what the result would be. First time I remember, I was 6 years old. The slightest provocation would set him off, but I lived through it. Nonetheless, McMahon persevered, surviving the beatings but never getting the opportunity to revenge himself on Lupton. In his interview, McMahon would express his regret. It's unfortunate that he died before I could kill him. I would have enjoyed that. Number 3. He considered ending himself. In addition to his physical abuse, there have been suggestions that McMahon may have been sexually abused as well. Consider the following questions and answers from his interview. Was the abuse all physical, or was there sexual abuse too? That's not anything I would like to embellish, just because it was weird. Did it come from the same man? No, it wasn't from the male. That's so mysterious, it sounds like a difficult thing for a kid to deal with. We can leave that topic, but one thing's first. You have said that the sexual abuse in your childhood wasn't from the male. It's well known that you're estranged from your mother. Have we found the reason? McMahon paused and nods. Without saying that, I'd say that's pretty close. According to 2 of McMahon's friends, the future WWE Kingpin contemplated suicide at one point, flirting with the idea of drowning himself by walking into the sea along the Carolina coast. Nonetheless, Vince endured and credits his experiences with his never give up attitude. Like I said, I grew up in a very volatile environment. My view was that if I took a beating and lived, I won. I still have that view. It gives me a tremendous advantage because I'm not afraid of failure. Don't get me wrong, I hate failing, but I'm not afraid to take chances and fall on my ass because if I live through it, I'll be better off and I'll win. Number 4. He's considered himself as a street fighter. Vinnie Mac recalls being on his own for the most part by the time he was 14, running with a local group of street toughs and getting into fights with Marines from Cherry Point Station, a nearby military base. According to the book Sex, Lies and Headlocks, native kids would hang out at the local drive-in, The Jet, waiting for them in the hope of starting fights. McMahon recalls majoring in badass as a teen, fighting with the local Marines. On Friday and Saturday nights, it was time to get it on with the Marines. It was a challenge. Most of them were in great condition. I'm not saying they were easy pickings, they got their testosterone going and they were all liquored up. Some of them were real tough, but me and my guys were street fighters. I mean, maybe you've been through basic training and you know how to operate a bayonet. That's different from sticking your finger in somebody's eye or hitting a guy in the throat, which comes naturally to a street fighter. And they can't believe you're not fighting fair. Suddenly they can't breathe or see, and they realize, oh my god, I'm in for an ass kicking. However, McMahon's account differs from that of one of his contemporaries. Douglas Franks recalls Vince's attempts to prove his toughness. He tried to be one of the gang kids, but he never quite made it. He was a wannabe. Number 5. He was forced to choose between going to military school or reform school. While Vince McMahon's tales of badassery may be unreliable, it It is known that he was a hellion as a teenager, repeatedly getting into trouble on a regular basis. According to McMahon, he stole cars, got into fights, and even ran moonshine on at least one occasion. Eventually though, his dirty deeds caught up, and he was given the choice of attending reform school or military school. With Vince's mother unable to pay for military school, McMahon's father intervened, paying for it, a gesture that paved the way for a relationship between Vince Sr. and Vince Jr. Military school was a tumultuous time, with McMahon claiming he was court-martialed and was the first cadet with that dubious distinction. The offense? Feeding a laxative to the commandant's dog, who proceeded to defecate in his master's apartment, which could have seen McMahon dismissed from the school. Instead, the teenage prankster beat the court-martial, perhaps an omen of his eventual victory against federal government when he was indicted in his infamous steroid trial. McMahon played football in military school, both as an offensive and defensive tackle. Unfortunately, the scrappy Southerner proved to be a poor player, recalling, "But all I really knew how to do was fight. So it was bring it on, but when you've got bare knuckles and you're hitting a guy with a helmet on, it's not good. I was used to gouging eyes and going for the throat. A big kick in the nuts is always primo. You hear the guy go, huh, and you think, his ass is mine. But you can't do that on the football field. Football is all about technique, and I was a lousy football player. In one game, I was personally penalized more yardage than our offense gained." Vince would graduate military school, showing his ability to get through anything, a trait he would show many times during his life. Number 6. He filed for bankruptcy. As anyone who's watched our Behind the Titantron episodes on the WBF and the XFL know, Vince McMahon's business ventures have not all been spectacular successes. Early in their business careers, Vince and Linda McMahon found themselves in a financial hole, filing for bankruptcy in 1976. In 2001, Vince explained to Playboy, "It was visions of sugar plums. It was, look how successful I am. I guess I really am somebody. I got involved with people who weren't that bright and let them tell me that I needed tax shelters. There was a construction company, a horse farm, a cement plant, and it all went belly up. I felt bad about the bankruptcy. I wanted to pay what I owed, but there were other people involved, and finally, the banks wrote it off." During her Senate campaign, Linda McMahon elaborated further, noting her and Vince invested in a construction company. "We signed personally on some loans from the bank to float that business for a while, and we didn't understand the industry. It went belly up. We tried for over a year to pay off the loans, and we just couldn't do it anymore, so we had to declare bankruptcy." Number 7. He tried to beat up Harley Race, and it almost cost him his life. 7-time NWA World Heavyweight Champion Harley Race is considered one of the toughest men to ever step through the squared circle, with manager Bobby the Brain Heenan noting Race was one of the few men Andre the Giant would not mess with. That didn't stop Vince McMahon though, after a business proposal didn't go the way he wanted. In 1983, Jim Crockett Promotions was preparing to run Starrcade, its first pay-per-view. McMahon saw this as an opportunity to sandbag one of his biggest competitors by sabotaging the main event. Vince McMahon flew Harley Race in to meet him for dinner 2 days before Starrcade to discuss business. At the time, Race was beginning to grow tired of wrestling, and despite his best efforts, his hectic travel schedule was straining his family life. To make matters worse, he was close to losing his $500,000 investment in his Heart of America wrestling promotion. Over dinner, McMahon offered Race $250,000 if he jumped to the WWF with the NWA Heavyweight Championship, effectively bailing on Starrcade and Jim Crockett Promotions. Race knew what a coup this would be for McMahon if he acquired the services of the NWA World Champion. The NWA Champion also knew that McMahon would need his answer that same night. But despite the financial temptation, Race could not turn his back on the organization that had given him so much, nor could he ignore his personal code of honor that demanded he drop the title to Ric Flair as promised. Race told McMahon no, unaware that by now, McMahon was used to getting what he wanted. After the dinner, an irate McMahon launched himself at Race, only to find himself caught in the crossfire. Race was ready to snap McMahon's neck, but his wife provided the voice of reason that saved McMahon's life. Never one to let a grudge get in the way of making money, McMahon brought Race into the WWF a few years later as the king of wrestling. Number 8. He owns a TRex skull. No, this isn't the skull of the dinosaur promoters Vince put out of business during the 80s, but a gift from his son-in-law Triple H, who saw it during one of his stints making films and picked it up for a mere $6,000. Rumor has it, Vince keeps the T-Rex skull in his office, presumably next to Roman Reigns' soul. Number 9. He keeps a large portrait of himself in his mansion. Who needs to run to the mirror and say, "What a handsome SOB," when you can lay back and gaze at the life-size portrait of yourself in your McMansion? Currently, there's not much known about who painted this masterpiece. And number 10. He has his own culinary crew. Vince McMahon is both a fitness freak and a health nut, demanding access to the finest gyms and the most nutritious food so he can maintain his remarkable physique and health. In order to keep his fitness, the WWE chairman has his own culinary crew for wherever he goes, preparing custom-made meals to meet his dietary needs and demands. Well guys, there you have it. The untold truth of Vince McMahon and his biggest secrets. Are you surprised by any of these? Would you like to see more? Let us know in the comments down below. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time with some more wrestling content.